Hello and welcome to this episode of Real Musicians Don't Starve. I'm your host, Michael Elsner, and today I'm here with my good friend, Michelle Sabolchick. And Michelle has had an amazing career in the music industry. She's mixed artists such as, Gwen Stefani, Kesha, Elvis Costello, Melissa Etheridge, Styx, and Mr. Big, which is actually how we met when we were on tour in 2009. And she's also a co-founder of soundgirls.org. She's also, and this is what I think is just the coolest, she is also in the Full Sail Hall of Fame. So she's mixed a lot of artists. I just touched on just a few, but I'm so happy to have Michelle here with us. And thanks for coming and hanging out with us today, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, this is awesome. So Michelle and I, like I said, we met back in 2009, actually in Japan. And we've had a really great friendship since, and it's been fun to see all the different artists who she's worked with over the years. And then and during that time, of course, she co-founded soundgirls.org, and a lot of people are a member of soundgirls.org. And then what was it, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, you were inducted into the Full Sail Hall of Fame?
2015.
Oh my gosh, the time has flown by. Was it really 4 years ago? 5 years ago? Oh my gosh. That just does not seem right.
Yeah. I think it was actually the induction ceremony was in early 2016, but it was, the 7th annual Full Sail Hall of Fame.
Okay.
7th, yeah.
Well, the thing that I love about your story is a lot of the musicians who I talk to have all at some point moved to a big music city in order to start their career. And you didn't, and you've had an amazing career, but you've always remained in Pennsylvania.
Well, I mean, not exactly. When I first got out of school, I moved around a lot up and down the East Coast to find work. But since my touring career got started, I've been in Pennsylvania. But it's a bit different. As a touring sound engineer, I can live anywhere. I don't need to live in a city where there's a music market, because when I'm home, I don't work. I just I spend like 280 days a year on a tour bus. So I just need an airport that gets me out to the start of the tour and home. Essentially I can live anywhere. If I did want to work, like if I did want to have a decent live sound job when I was home, then a big city, or at least a city where there's a good live music industry would be something to look for. But when I got out of school, I spent a lot of time between Pennsylvania and Philly and Florida, just moving around to find work in audio. But once my touring career started, it's been Pennsylvania.
At that point, were you just working in clubs, or how?
I was working as a stagehand. I was mixing local bands. I was working in a bunch of different nightclubs. I was working at an AV department in Church Street Station in Orlando, which I don't even think is there anymore. It was a big entertainment complex. But I was taking every job I could get in audio. So I did a little studio assisting even in the beginning as well.
Oh, wow. Okay. But then once you got the career going and you moved back to Pennsylvania, the nice thing about your job is that, you don't have to be in a music city. A lot of the people that I talk to are touring and performing musicians.
Yeah.
Big part of that is living in a music city. Of course, in the world that I live in with licensing, the majority of that business happens out in Los Angeles. And of course, I don't live in Los Angeles anymore. I did live there to get started. But, there are certain roles that you can play in the music industry and have successful careers where you don't actually have to live in a big music metropolis.
Right, yeah.
And so with your career, I always like to start with a vision of success. All of us have a vision of what success looks like to us. And oftentimes the reality is not what the vision was, especially growing up, right? So as someone who's had a very successful career, constantly working, constantly touring, constantly working with A-list artists, what is your vision of success when it comes to being a successful individual who works in the music industry? How do you define success?
Well, it's, like for me, like the basic definition would be just to, achieve your desired goal. But it's a very personal thing, and it looks different to everyone. And I think it's really important to take a good hard look at who you are and what success means to you, because it is going to look different for someone else. And you could spend, years working towards someone else's vision of success, and you'll end up being very disappointed. Like for me, it was to go on tour mixing music that I enjoyed, being a concert sound engineer on the road, and making a living at that. And just, mixing bands and music that I really enjoyed. Where for, there's other people who their idea of success is mixing either, I want to just mix huge stadiums and arena tours. That means I'm successful. I don't care what the artist is. Or some other engineers want to mix the biggest name artists. And to me, it was more about, it's all about the music. It's about the music that inspires me and that I can enjoy, rather than just mixing a huge tour of some music that I can't stand, but it's a big stadium tour, so who cares? Like that wouldn't have felt like success to me. That would have just been painful.
Yeah.
So, in that sense, I've mixed, all different levels from club tours to stadium tours, but I've turned down, a lot of tours that other people would have jumped at because it was not music that I could see myself listening to every night. And I've turned down huge tours to mix smaller tours where I knew I was going to love what I was doing every day. So
yeah. So success is ultimately working on the music that you love.
For me, yeah.
So you've been mixing for a long time, and technology has changed pretty dramatically. From when we both started, in this industry. It's kind of funny to look back on what we had back, when we were starting. What do you do to continue to make yourself valuable to the people who hire you?
Yeah, well, the technology is a huge part of that. Where I always strive to do the best job I can. And, whether that means keeping up with technology as it's changing, like when I started mixing, it was all analog, and, now the industry is 90% digital. So there's a learning curve. You've got to be able to move with the technology. Also just learning the artists. Like when I get hired for a tour, I spend a lot of time doing homework, learning the artist's catalog and learning their background, their influences, all kinds of stuff like that. As much as I can learn about the person I'm working for, just helps me in doing my job. So it's, it's just a constant work. Even when you're not working, you're doing your homework, whether it's learning new skills or new technology or ear training, because that's my ears are my job. So, it's doing a lot of listening and really like critical listening, picking apart what I'm hearing.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, do you go out and see a lot of shows yourself, or when you're off the road, are you kind of like, I'm done with live venues?
Yeah, it's tough because I will tend to go and visit friends that are on tour when they come through town, but usually leave before the show starts. I have a hard time even going to see bands that I like because it's too much like work. But I do enjoy, like occasionally I will go see something and or if I'm doing a festival, go watch other artists, especially other engineers that I enjoy, because I love to hear other really good engineers, because you can always learn something from them. So I was doing a tour years ago where I was mixing the support act, and the headline act was music that I just didn't like. But the engineer did such an amazing job. So every night after we'd finish, I'd go watch like the first 3 or 4 songs of their set, just because I loved to listen to his mix. Even though I couldn't stand the music, it was still, there's something about listening to a great mix that you can always learn from. So, yeah.
Now I've been working in the music industry for over 20 years, and I'm going to put this one on the record. During that time, I've worked with a number of female engineers, and there aren't a lot of female engineers out there. And I will say that all of the ones that I've worked with have been absolutely phenomenal. They've actually been some of the best, and you're one of the best that I've worked with as well. But there's also a lot of times, you hear, that it's a man's world. It's a man's, mixing and studio work and being out on the road. That's a man's job. And the reality is that some of my female friends who do that are better than most of the guys out there doing it that I know of. My question to you is, what has your experience been? Because of course I know you started soundgirls.org, which is an incredible organization for women, supported by women. What's your experience been as a female out in the touring world, and how do you look at that world as far as when it comes to other females jumping into the touring world?
Well, I mean, I started working in live sound back in the 80s when there were very, very few women. The only other woman I knew of was Carrie Keyes, who was my co-founder in Sound Girls. And it never really, I never really gave it much thought that, oh, there's no women doing this, so I probably can't. Like, it was my goal and I had a passion for it. So I just didn't let anything stop me, it never concerned me that I didn't know any other women doing it. And, I've met with a lot of surprise through the years when people find out I'm the sound engineer as opposed to the wardrobe girl. You get a lot of strange looks, but it's, surprise. It's just because there's, like you said, there's probably, I think the stats are like 5% of the engineers in the world are women. So, it's not something people see every day. But I've really never dealt with a lot of it's never been an issue like where it's stopped me from getting a job. It's never, or at least as far as I know. I actually have one band who I was mixing General Public back in the 90s, and their management asked me to mix. They had an up and coming band, and it was a hard, heavy rock band that they wanted me to go out on tour with. And we were, sorting it all out. And then they called me and they said, well, we told the band that we were going to hire this woman engineer, and they didn't like that because they were young and they wanted to party and have chicks on the bus and, go crazy every night. And they said they were going to feel really uncomfortable doing all that with a woman on the bus. Mm-hmm. And at that point I was like, you know what, fine. I appreciate them being honest, because that's not really a situation I want to be in the middle of either, so it wasn't, like I didn't get the job because I was a woman, but not because of, oh, well, you're a woman, you can't possibly do this. It was just more of a fact of, they were being honest. It's like, look, we're going to be rock stars and we don't want to have a girl around that's going to make us feel guilty for whatever. But, on the same token, I've gotten other jobs because I was a woman. Mr. Big, those guys hired me because, they said basically it's like, well, you've been in the business this long, we figured you must be good. So, because if you're a woman. And I think like you said, women have to prove themselves a lot harder and have to work a lot harder than men in the business to be taken seriously. So that just tends to make you better at the job, because you do work you put that extra effort in to really learn the craft and really be good at what you do, because you're constantly being judged, but you just have to kind of just learn how to let a lot of stuff slide. You can't get your panties in a bunch over every little thing or comment, because it's just going to make you aggravated, so you have to learn to let a lot of stuff roll off of you. But at the same time, that's a skill that you need as a sound engineer, because especially if you're working with a band, you have to be able to, guys are on stage having a bad night and they're taking it out on you, even though it's nothing to do with you. You just have to learn how to let a lot of stuff slide, because you're always in the hot seat. And, guitar player could have had a fight with his girlfriend before he walked on stage, and suddenly, he's pissed because his sound is terrible that night and it's all your fault. But it had nothing to do with you. It's just that he was in a bad mood. But tomorrow he'll be fine. And if you start taking all that personally, then it just makes you, a lot more stressed and start second guessing yourself when you don't really need to. So there is kind of, learning how to let a lot of stuff slide really is a skill that you need to learn for the job anyway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's true. No matter, male or female, anytime you're out on the road, there are, personalities, and, you have someone who's just having a bad day, and sometimes some people hold it in and other people don't hold it in, and those sometimes you just have to let things go. If someone's having a bad day, they're a little bit more on edge. That's who that person is right now. Just gotta let it go.
And when you're living on a tour bus with them, it's like you really have to learn how to not take things personally because you're living in the same space 24/7. So it's not like you get to go home at the end of the day and go to your house and be away from them. So.
Right, right. So throughout your career, what would you say has been the most important strategy or approach that you've taken when it comes to getting consistent work?
I would say the biggest thing is building a network and just networking and building your list of contacts and keeping up with them, because for my end of the business, the jobs are all word of mouth. It's not like you put out a couple resumes and hope someone's going to call you. It's a matter of every job I've gotten is through someone I've known. My first tour came from a classmate from Full Sail. He knew how bad I wanted to go on tour, and he was on the road and he was ready to leave the tour, and he gave me the opportunity. But it's so much of it's as much as who you know and what you know. Like, you need to have the skills for one, you need to have the chops, but you need that person who's going to give you the the recommendation for the job. And that's the first thing. Like, when someone's looking for a sound engineer, it's usually the tour managers and production managers that do the hiring. So if they don't know, if all of their contacts, if none of those are available, the first thing they do is ask those contacts who they trust, who can you recommend? It's never just, let's collect 100 resumes and see who we like. It's always coming from someone else, a recommendation. So.
Yeah. And then at that point, is it an interview that takes place, or because it's a recommendation, you generally kind of get the job? How does that work a lot of the time?
No, it's usually like, hey, I'm looking for an engineer for this tour, and so said that you're available, and you have a conversation about, the details. It's kind of like, here's what the job is, here's what it's paying, here's the dates, are you available and interested? And then, that's pretty much it. Like, usually if they haven't seen your resume, sometimes they'll ask to see your resume. Some bands will want to know, like, some bands are way more hands-on, so they want to see the resume of every person that's being considered. On other ones, they just tell the production manager, just hire somebody. So each job is a little bit different in that aspect.
Do you find in the live world that it's important to have like an online presence, like a website and an actual online presence, or is that just not so important?
No, I don't think so. I mean, like, I've never had one up until recently. I've never had a website or an online presence. So, I mean, I've known people who have gotten jobs through LinkedIn. That Fela Davis, who's also another Full Sail Hall of Famer, she works for Christian McBride. She does front house for Christian McBride, and she basically got that job, that hired from posting her. She does a lot of live recordings, and just from posting on LinkedIn. And he was searching for someone, saw her resume, saw some of her posts, and called her up. So it does happen. It's not common. It's more of just who have you worked for and who can I call to vouch for you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. The music industry is definitely interesting in that respect, depending on the path that you're going down. If you're an artist, obviously you have to have the internet presence, right? And I asked that question for a reason, because I knew what the answer was already. But I also wanted to relate to, like, in the world that I live in, which is the licensing world. I don't have any online presence. In fact, today, as we're filming this is the 1-year anniversary from my last Instagram post. And it's just kind of funny. But so I will make my post today, and I'm going to post a photo of a dog. And then I'll, but the thing is, depending on the path that you're going down, as long as you're delivering value to your end users, for you, the people that you're delivering value to would be obviously the artist. And so you're going to be in contact with the management and the production manager and whatnot, for them, which is really a small world. For me, it's the people I'm providing value to are music supervisors and music editors who are working on different television shows. Again, it's a very small world. The social media aspect doesn't really play into that. Right. But, if you're developing a fan base and, you're trying to build, a reputation so you can go out and play shows and all that kind of stuff and release a record to the general public, that becomes a whole different outlet. Your end users of your music is a it's a massive market. And yeah, at that point you need to start having a social media and a web presence. But at that point, I think it's really understanding who your end users are and who the people that you're serving are, you know? So when it comes to your career, you've obviously had good times, you know, and moments that things are just, you know, happening and gig after gig after gig after gig. But then, of course, there's also the down periods. You know,
Like now.
it's a cyclical. It's a cyclical business. And right now we're at a time where all the shows and all the tours are done. So my question to you is how do you stay, what do you do during those downtimes? What are the strategies? You know, what are the mindsets that you have during those downtimes, or not even the downtimes, but also there's a lot of rejection that happens in this industry. You know, when you don't get the gig, what are the strategies that you implement and the mindsets that you have to overcome those downtimes or those periods of rejection?
Right. Well, it's kind of like two different questions there. Like rejection. Yeah. I mean, when I first started out, when I graduated from Full Sail and I was trying to get my foot in the door with the touring industry, I sent out hundreds of resumes. I mean, I was working, that's when I was working at, you know, like 4 different jobs. I was a stagehand, I worked at a local sound company, I worked at a nightclub, and I worked in the AV department. And in the, you know, during the week, I would go through and send probably 50 resumes a week to every sound company in the country that I could find, saying, I want to, you know, I want to work for you. And just constant rejection, you know, and following up with phone calls and, you know, just being told we're not hiring. So once I got my first tour, I kind of thought, oh, all right, I did it. I'm on the road. And I expected the tours to just keep coming. And this was a big mistake I made in the beginning, was when I talk about, you know, like the biggest thing is your network. I was kind of shy, and I kind of tended to just like, you know, do my thing. And on my first tour, we were doing the Horde tour. And you know, here I am with a whole bunch of other bands, other production managers and tour managers, all people who would be potential contacts for future work. But instead of really getting to know them and reaching out and putting myself out there to them and like, here's my info if you ever need anybody, I just kind of kept to myself. And so then when my tour ended a year later, I was out of a job, and so was everybody that I knew in the business. So it was kind of back to square one, like, okay, well, how do I get on another tour? So you know, then it was a matter of trying, you know, just kind of cold calling people, but they didn't know me. They had, other than I did this one tour. So there was a lot of, you know, the periods of rejection until I built up my reputation and start to build a name for myself. You know, lots of tours that I put my name in the hat and just didn't get. So you just kind of have to keep going forward. You know, you can't just stop. You just have to keep, okay, this person said no. Well, maybe the next person will say yes. So you just have to keep plugging ahead. That's the only way to deal with it. Because if you give up, then you're done, you know. Yeah. The other thing with the downtime is, you know, for most of the past, I've been touring for almost 30 years. And for a good probably 25 of those years, I spent an average of 280 days a year on the road. So my downtime comes in like little spurts of like a month here and a month there. And for me, it's just, I take that time to just kind of regroup and balance and, you know, kind of refresh. Because if I just went from tour to tour to tour constantly, I'd be burned out. So I take the downtime to just kind of do life, you know, all the stuff that you can't do when you're on tour because your life is touring. When it's forced downtime like this, basically, and when I have extended periods of time off between tours, I'm constantly either, you know, just brushing up on skills. Like I spent the first couple of weeks here after COVID hit and we all had to self-isolate, learning SMART, Rational Acoustic SMART, which is something I've been wanting to do for years. And that's something that normally my system tech handles, the system optimization part of setting up a PA. But it's a skill that I've always wanted to learn, and I just never had the time. So that was the first thing. I'm like, all right, I'm going to learn SMART. So they had an online training for about 6 weeks. Did that, you know, and then it's like, all right, well, what's the next thing I've been wanting to learn? So I take advantage of that stuff, or that, you know, during my time off, to see what other skills I can pick up. Or, you know, I taught myself Pro Tools a couple of years ago, you know, and things like that. But the key is just, I think, planning ahead in this business, because a lot of people don't think too far in the future, and you have to always plan for that rainy day. Like I know a lot of people who are just kind of getting started in the live industry, and they watch their revenue for the next 6-12 months just dry up and go away, and they don't know what to do. So you've always got to plan like that emergency fund of like what happens, because we never know. Even if you're hired for a tour, tours cancel all the time, at the last minute. And it doesn't mean you're going to get paid, even though the tour was supposed to go. A lot of times it's, well, if that tour goes away, so does your income. There's not often a severance package, it's
Right.
just kind of like, now I've got to find another gig, or, so it's just kind of having the mindset of always hustling, always looking for your next job, always brushing up on your skills, just making good use of your time.
Mm-hmm. And networking, like you said earlier.
Networking, yeah. Like it's a great time now. People are, reaching out, doing little Zoom chats and catching up with each other on a regular basis via Zoom, to just stay in touch and stay on the top of each other's minds. So when the industry opens back up, and there's gigs out there, you're immediately like someone thinks of you. So.
Hey, I just want to jump in here for a second and let you know that if any of your goals over the next year include recording and releasing a new album, generating placements of your songs on TV shows and films, or just building a fan base that will sustain your music career, I want to invite you to my special workshop, Real Musicians Don't Starve. And in this workshop, we are going to focus on the 3 keys to your success, and you're going to learn an extremely powerful strategy that allows you to create your own wow factor. This allows you to attract opportunities to you and your music, as well as remove any financial worry from your life. You can check out this workshop for free at realmusiciansdon'tstarve.com/workshop. Now back to the podcast. Yeah, you just hit on a great word, a great phrase, top of mind. And that's one of the things that I think is so important, even in the world that I live in with the licensing. The goal is always to stay top of mind. Of course, you're always trying to provide value to your end users, but you want to stay top of mind in an honest way, in the sense of, you want to just send out, be in contact with people without the intent of, I'm just contacting this person so that I can get something from them, which is, a terrible approach. But you stay in contact with them because, you genuinely want to have friends and reach out to people and see what's going on in their lives and stay in contact with each other. And I think that's the easiest and the best way to always stay top of mind. I actually think that there's a lot of people right now who are using the quarantine and the COVID, virus time to really expand their network extensively. And I think those are the people who are going to be perfectly positioned for when everything opens up again.
Right.
So with that being said, I do have an interesting question for you. I would like to know if you could go back to Michelle, who the day after you graduated Full Sail, the day after you graduated, if you could go and you could sit at a diner or a coffee shop and sit across the table from each other, what are 2 pieces of advice that you would give the younger version who's just starting out in her career, the younger Michelle?
Well, the first one would be like to stop being shy and start networking as soon as possible, because the sooner you can conquer that, the better you are. So learn how to network. And the second would be to find a mentor. Because I get asked that a lot, like who was my mentor? And I really didn't have one. And even at that time, mentoring in this business wasn't such a big thing, but I had people who supported me. I had definitely had support of other engineers and other people in the business, but I didn't have what you would call a mentor in the true sense of the word. And it's just so, it's such a benefit to have someone that someone who is where you want to be, who you can have a relationship with, where you're comfortable saying, hey, can you give me some career advice, or just pick their brain about issues that come up that you don't know how to deal with. And, somebody who's kind of can help you avoid some of the mistakes that you're going to make. Because, life is too short to, like, you get places by learning from your mistakes, but life's too short to make all the mistakes yourself. So if you can learn from other people's mistakes and save yourself some time, then that just kind of puts you ahead of the game a little bit.
Yeah.
So I think finding a good mentor would be a good thing.
I actually think those have been the two of the best answers I've heard to that question so far. I definitely relate to both because when I graduated Full Sail, I was also a graduate of the school. I I was extremely shy, and for me, overcoming the shyness was I think probably one of the biggest hurdles that I had early in my career. And I'd love to know how you overcame that.
I don't. It just took time. I think I started to realize that well, if I don't open up my mouth and go up and talk to this group of people and tell them who I are and what I do, they're not going to just come to me, and say, "Oh, what are you doing here?" So I just kind of I observed, being well, first of all, being a woman and a man in male-dominated business, I kind of observed how men would tend to, like, when I would be doing I'd be doing shows like the Grammys or somewhere where there's a ton of bands and a bunch of crew people backstage, and I would notice that men would tend to walk up to each other and be like, "Hey, who do you work for? What are you doing here?" And where women kind of look at that, we tend to look at that as kind of bragging, like, "Oh, I'm not going to walk up there and tell somebody I'm the front of house engineer for Joan Osborne." They're going to be like, "Oh, well, who do you think you are?" So it's a very different way that women and men kind of deal with things. And I observed how all the men I worked with would do that. And it's kind of clicked one day. It's like, well, okay, well, I guess, yeah, they all want to know, well, who the hell is this chick? Why is she here? What's she doing? It's not that they're looking at me weird. They just want to know, was she a groupie, or is she working here? Is she wardrobe? Is she catering? What is she doing? So it just kind of helped pull me out of my shell and get more comfortable walking up to other crew people and in situations like that and introducing myself, and then immediately it's kind of a sizing up, like, well, who are you and what are you doing here? But it's also a breaking the ice of, oh, now we have something to talk about because we're both doing the same thing. And
Yeah.
so it was a lot of observation of how other people behaved, and just kind of getting more confidence in my abilities and my skills, like having a little bit more on my resume to say, well, yes, it's not my first tour. I've been doing this a couple times,
Yeah.
Because when you're young and you're starting out, you have that huge insecurity on your back of like, am I just a fluke, or am I really good at this? So
It's so funny because I've known you now for 11 years.
and you'd never need me to be shy.
I would have, and that's why I'm so blown away by that. Cause I still remember, the first day we met at, that studio in Los Angeles. And I just would have never,
right,
ever thought that you were a shy individual. But at the same point, I love that you said that, because that was me. I was the kid where I couldn't have a conversation unless we were talking, and I always joke about it, but it's true. Unless we were talking about like Eddie Van Halen or Randy Rhoads, two guitar players. I could not have a conversation in my early 20s with people unless we were talking really about guitar-based stuff. But the way that I look back on it, the reality is I was actually never shy. Somewhere along the line of being a teenager, the story got created in my head that I was shy, and I don't really know where that started from. But then I always just think of it like I just played into that story that I've been telling myself for many years through my teens. Well, I'm just a shy kid, But much like you, when I got out of school, I got out of Full Sail and studying engineering and production. It was very apparent within the first day that if I was actually going to be able to make a career for myself, and the funny thing is, I was pursuing a career as a guitar player, but I went to school to learn production. But if I was going to make a career for myself, I actually had to open my mouth and start meeting people and networking. And that was a big hurdle. But then, once I looked at networking as a fun game, for me, it was like a mindset shift. When I started looking at it as a fun game and as a great way to meet people, I really enjoyed it. And I think that's what really brought me out of that shell, because I genuinely just wanted to meet people and learn who they were and what they did and get that common connection. And then you start learning very quickly. People aren't just sitting back and judging. People are all in the same position where they're all looking to meet other people and connect with other people, especially in this industry, which is such a people business.
Yeah.
So
it's the key of just finding that common ground that you can start the conversation on, like, what do you have in common with a person that you can talk about?
Yeah, yeah, and at that point, then it becomes really enjoyable.
Mhm.
But wow, I would have never have expected that that you were a shy person at one point. But that just goes a lot. That just says a lot about, like, how you overcame that, and how that's not even remotely a part of who you are, now, or even when we met 11 years ago.
Right,
So
right.
also, I want to talk about this because I think this is so important. You were talking about during the downtime how you've used this downtime to study other programs and work on your skill set. But at the same point, I think it's so cool that also during this downtime, you actually created a program specifically on EQing.
Yeah, I did. I have a course called Listen and Master the EQ Techniques of the Pros to Create Brilliant Mixes. And it's all about how to use EQ properly, how to train your ears to hear frequencies, how to hear what's missing in the tone of an instrument or a mix, or what needs to be adjusted so you can actually use EQ to get the sounds that you want and improve your mixes and your sounds.
Yeah. And Michelle sent me this, she sent me access to this course probably about a month ago. And she's like, "Hey, I just finished this course. You should check it out." And I wrote her back. I said, "Yeah, okay, I'll get to it next week." And we'll say that was like a Tuesday, all right? And that was like Tuesday afternoon. And Tuesday evening, probably around 10:30, I was getting ready for bed, and I thought, well, I'll just open it up and I'll just see, what this is like. And I opened it up, and I was up till well after midnight, probably about 2 hours, watching this course, and my mind was blown. And I actually, like, I was gonna text you. It was gonna be well past midnight your time, so I decided not to. But I actually wrote her an email. I was like, "This is unbelievable." But I want you to share one thing from it, which there's so much good stuff in it, but for a lot of our performing, for a lot of our listeners, I know a lot of our listeners are performing artists, and as a performer myself, I'm used to going up behind the microphone and just go check 1 2 1 2, and I never really understood. Aside from I just thought, well, yeah, I'm just going check 1 2 check 1 2, just so that the sound person can figure out my levels. But you actually got into the details, and I think this is fascinating. I'd love for you to share just how important something as simple as that is to a sound engineer, and all the different frequencies that you get out of that phrase. If you could talk about that for us.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's many different ways that you can learn frequencies, and one thing is by certain words. Sounds, are in different frequency ranges, and the words check 1 2. There's a reason that sound people say that is because the word check, the ch part, is up in the like 4K, 5K range. And this is, everybody's voice is a little bit different, but it's usually, somewhere close by. The 1 is in the mid range, and the 2, is usually somewhere in the low mids, the part that gets really muddy in a vocal, like whoo. So when you're using those words, a lot of times you'll see other crew people making fun of the monitor engineer when they're up there making all kinds of strange sounds in the microphone. But there's a reason for those sounds, because those words and those sounds are exciting certain frequencies. So that's how you basically ring out the microphones in the monitor wedge to clean it up and make it sound really crystal clear and get it sounding the way you want. And they're also, it's a great skill for musicians to have, especially if you struggle with getting good sound on stage or even in ear monitors. If you can identify the frequencies, then you can communicate with your monitor engineer or your sound engineer to get exactly what you need. So you're having a much better performance because things sound the way you want them to, as opposed to struggling all night because something's just really harsh and it's just killing your ears. But you don't know how to explain, hey, can you take out some 2.5K because that's just really hitting me too hard, or it's really boxy, which is usually 630, 800 hertz. If you're especially playing like acoustic guitar, acoustic instruments like that, a lot of times if you can communicate what you're hearing to the sound engineer, that just makes your world a lot easier. Instead of saying, well, it doesn't sound right, but I don't know what's wrong, So by learning frequencies and learning in your voice what certain words, what frequencies those excite. So if you're standing there in front of your, speaking into your vocal mic and in front of your wedge, and it's kind of go, ooh, well, if you know that when you go to, it's that same frequency, and that's like 250 hertz, you can easily turn and say, hey, take out 250 hertz. And that quick, it's fixed, as opposed to struggling with something all night that's just annoying you, but you don't know how to get rid of.
Yeah. So when I was going through your program, the thing that hit me more than anything was specifically, a lot of the words, coming from a musician standpoint, my ear training is learning intervals, like the Star Wars theme, bum, bum, right, dun, 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 right. That's a perfect fifth. The Who Comes the Bride, Here Comes the Bride, Who Comes the Bride, Here Comes the Bride, that's a perfect fourth. Crazy Train, Ozzy Osbourne's Crazy Train, that's a minor sixth. So for me as a musician, I've learned the relation of notes based on different songs and melodies, that we're all very familiar with, that we hear all the time. And so when I was going through your course, it never hit me all the frequencies in different words, and the vowel sounds and the consonants and the tss sound, all those upper frequencies that we get from those, like the sibilant, right? The sibilant frequencies up there, and then the ooh and the two and whatnot. And oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. Two, that's sitting in the low, 250, 300 range. And so when I started going through your program and I started learning that, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I knew this years ago, just mixing, my own music.
Mm-hmm.
It would make the process so much easier instead of always sweeping EQs. Now, as you do it more and more, you start to hear things. But for people who are starting out, learning how to mix, whether it's live or in the studio on your own recordings in your home studio, learning EQ like this, like your program is amazing, and there's nothing out there like it. And I just was so excited when I went through it, and it's so affordable, which is amazing too. But now that this is an ad for your program, it's just that it's such a great resource for musicians, and I just love the fact that you took the time, during this quarantine to realize, oh, there's a need for this. I'm sure you get asked this stuff all the time yourself.
I actually mentor a lot of aspiring sound engineers. And I also have another course that is basically an intro to live sound and mixing. And from the people that I mentor and the young sound engineers that I meet that are just getting started, and the people in my other course, one of the biggest things that they struggle with is EQ, like learning how to use it properly, like just not knowing. They struggle with learning frequencies and learning how to hear frequencies in the music, because it's, there's a lot of apps out there that you can use to train your ears for frequencies, like, this is 400 hertz and it plays a 400 hertz tone. But a 400 hertz tone is very different from hearing a mix that has too much 400 in it. So that's why I think a lot of people struggle with learning frequencies, is you don't have anything to relate it to. It's like you can hear an 800 hertz sine wave, but that's not going to do you any good when you're listening to an acoustic guitar that's got way too much 800 in it. Yeah. Or, something that's missing. So I just kind of glean from all of that, all their feedback, that, okay, people do really struggle with learning frequencies, training their ears, and learning how to use EQ quickly and efficiently. Because you can sweep, boost, and sweep for days, and that's a great way to start. But when you're doing live sound, or you're in an environment where you have a short amount of time, you have to be able to do it quickly. So you need to know what you're looking for, as opposed to just spend an hour trying to find the perfect kick drum EQ. Right. In live sound, you got about a minute, if that.
So such good information. I would love to wrap up with one more question, and that is, what would your advice be to anyone who, a lot of people have preconceived notions of why they can't be successful at something. What would your advice be to someone who has their mindset? They're telling them something that's preventing them from moving forward.
Well, I think we can easily create our own roadblocks for ourselves. You basically have to do the hard work of just, sitting down with yourself and looking inside to what is it that is holding me back. Is it fear of success? Is it something else? Is it insecurity that I'm not good enough? Because we can find a million of excuses of why we aren't successful. But I think in this business, for one thing, you have to have a passion for it. Whether you're a musician, producer, engineer, it's not an easy business. It's a lot of hard work to be successful, and to make a career out of it. And if there's not a serious passion that's driving you, you'll never be able to withstand the conditions and the hours and the hard work that you have to put into to succeed. So you need to have, something that's driving that. Because it's not the kind of work where you just, okay, I'm going to go to school, get a degree, send out a couple of applications, and someone hires me. It doesn't work like that. You almost have to create your own job. So it's a matter of, being honest with yourself. Do I have the moxie or whatever to pursue and persevere to get to where I want to be? And if you don't, that's fine. Like if you take a look at it and say, I don't want to spend 5-10 years trudging it out playing clubs and hoping to make it big as a musician. I'd rather just go work at Amazon. That's fine. There's always room to course correct, but you have to be honest with yourself. And if it's truly your passion, you have to draw on that and persevere until you find your way in. And it's a matter of just not giving up. Don't say, oh, well, I didn't get this gig because I'm this or I'm that or whatever. I mean, I grew up in a little tiny town in the middle of nowhere. And when I decided, I originally wanted to be a recording engineer. And when I told people that, they're like, oh, a DJ. I'm like, no, I want to make records. Well, you can't do that. Everybody told me I couldn't do it. From my high school guidance counselor to my family, to my friends. I mean, no one supported my dream except for me.
Can I ask why did they not support it? Was it because they didn't think that a girl in a small town could get into the music industry, or did they not think that a girl could become a recording engineer?
Girl, it had to be like, it was a little tiny town in the middle of nowhere. There was no music industry.
Yeah.
MTV had just begun at that point. So it was a matter of, how are you going to make a living at that? You need to get an education. You need to go to college and get a real degree and a real job. Be a music teacher, not some recording engineer. How are you going to make a living at that?
Yeah.
So it was more of, oh, well, you have to have something to fall back on. But I didn't. I insisted, like, this is what I'm going to do. And it, it didn't happen overnight. I went to college for a year, realized I wasn't going to learn in college what I needed to know. Then I went to the recording workshop in Chillicothe to learn basic recording engineering. After that, I worked at a radio station for a bit and realized I still don't know enough. And then I went to Full Sail. But all along that path, I never had anyone supporting me saying, yeah, you can do this, until I got to Full Sail, actually. But so if I just gave up because everyone said, oh, well, you can't do that, and listen to them, then I wouldn't be where I am today, And if I just said, oh, well, I'm from a small town, I'm from a poor family, I'm from nothing and nowhere, how am I ever going to do this? And if I bought into that, I wouldn't have succeeded. I'd probably be working at a factory somewhere. Mm-hmm. But, so you've got to have a passion, and that was what drove me, is my passion for music and wanting to do this for a living. So yeah, it's a matter of just, like I said, I wanted to be a recording engineer to start with, but when I got to Full Sail, I decided live sound was more interesting to me because I also wanted to travel. So I shifted gears and then pursued live sound, and that's what it's been ever since. But so it's okay to course correct, but the bottom line is being honest with yourself. And I knew that I was going to do whatever it took. Like, I was going to work as hard as I had to work till I got to where I wanted to be. And that, to me, this job, you work 16, 18-hour days regularly. A show day starts at load in at 9 a.m. or earlier, and you're getting back on the bus at 1 or 2 a.m., that night. So the conditions are terrible a lot of times. The hours are long. The catering is crap. But at the end of it, I love what I do. I've never felt in 30 years that I've worked. I love my job. I love my career. I love what I do. And it doesn't feel like working to me. I mean, there's days when, yes, it's brutal, but at the end, it's worth it because of the payoff of living your dream. So
yeah. I think the one of the things I've always enjoyed touring and traveling, and it is definitely a bit of work for sure. But you're right. It doesn't feel like work a lot of the time, because it really is. It's your life. It's what you're passionate about, and when you're not doing it, you miss it.
Right.
And I think the other thing that's important for everyone listening to keep in mind, I'm such a big advocate for this, is that success in the music industry is not some elusive thing. Mm-hmm. It's not just going to appear to anyone who shows up and says, I want to be successful, because you do have to put in the work, but the reality is that, I mean, you have two people now who are here from small towns in the Northeast, right. Who I could say probably didn't have the most supportive, support system pursuing their career. But the reality is that if you're really passionate about it and you're willing to put in the work and study and develop your skill set. By study, I mean really work on the skill set and have the mindset that you've basically burned the bridges behind you. There is no turning back. It's you have to be successful. The doors will open for you.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. It's like I also, when I started, down this path, I told everybody I met, I want to be a recording engineer. I want to work in concert sound. I want to go on tour. And so that's kind of where the opportunities came from. It's like people saw how hard I worked, how dedicated I was, and they gave me opportunities. They said, hey, I know of this job, or I know somebody who could use you. So it's a matter of working really hard to show people that you're dedicated and you're serious, and then taking the opportunities when they come.
Yeah, you're right. You are out there creating your own opportunities.
Yeah.
Awesome, Michelle. Well, I always love to end each episode with our manifesto, and that is, real musicians are business owners, and our business is music. A business is simply an organization where value is provided in order to make a profit. And unlike starving musicians who operate with a mindset of scarcity and fear, as success-driven musicians, we operate with a mindset of abundance, confidence, and service. We are doers, we are dreamers, we are creators, and we are achievers. We know that our true value is determined by how many people we serve and how well we serve them, because our truth is, real musicians don't starve. So thank you, Michelle, for joining us today. A lot of awesome information. And if anyone wants to go and check out your programs, mm-hmm. they can go to mixingmusiclive.com.
Yep.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we will see you in the next episode.